So ladies, I have another message for you. I don't know if you're going to want to hear this one or not, but I call it the now versus the not yet. And when I was in seminary years ago, that was a phrase that a sizable number of our professors used in teaching us. And what it referred to was simply this. The now is the world that we live in now, with fallen human beings who have a fallen nature from the womb to the tomb. And it is what Luther called it, a Scheißhaus. And that means exactly what you think it means. And that's what Martin Luther, the originator of the Protestant movement, called the here and now. And the not yet refers to the time outside of time, when we die and pass into heaven and stand before Christ and are made whole, or the time outside of time when he comes back and we're gathered to him. Now, the problem with all of this that I see today is that churches in particular, and even now in 2022, when we're on what I believe is the verge of war and grotesque bankruptcy all at the same time, they still have a tendency of wanting to drag the not yet, heaven, all of that, into the here and now. And this has a tendency of filling people up with what I refer to as false hope or hopium, which is, the erroneous assumption that they can be liberated, from their sinful nature, the erroneous assumption perhaps that they can obtain perfection in this life, the erroneous assumption that God will prosper them greatly in this life. See, I think a lot of that stems from, once again, dragging the not yet into the here and now, even though the Bible doesn't teach that. Our hope is not in what we're going to, experience here in this place, in the now. It's in what we have in Christ when we pass on and are with him. That makes sense? So that's really what it is all about. Now, that doesn't necessarily fill your pews preaching that, and it doesn't necessarily fill the coffers of your church preaching that. But it is the truth. It is what the Bible teaches. And I think another aspect of this too is that when we tend to drag the not yet into the here and now, it tends to blind us to what's going on in the here and now. And I'll give you an example really quick, but you look at the time of Jeremiah, and we've talked about him repeatedly, right? He was more or less known as the weeping prophet, and he was pretty much the last of the prophets in Judah, the southern kingdom of Judah, while they were still a sovereign country. And during his time, I think the church of his day was doing much the same thing that the church of today is doing, in that they were dragging the not yet into the here and now. And because of that, they were blind to what was happening as far as Judah and Babylon were concerned. They were blind to the fact that in the very near future, they were going to go into captivity. And because of that, they weren't preparing the people for that. They weren't crying out to the Lord for deliverance. And I think that to a large degree, that's what the American church is doing today. We're grotesquely bankrupt now in this country, just like Judah was. Judah was bankrupt too. And Judah was on the verge of a war, which he probably wouldn't win, which I think America may be too. And yet the churches, because of what I just told you, were largely asleep. And so I suppose my advice to both of you is operate in the here and now and keep the not yet in its proper perspective. Your hope is not here. Your hope is in Christ. And because your hope is in Christ, you are then able to see clearly while you're here. God bless you both.